Hello and welcome to today's webinar on optimizing the software supply chain for IoT success. My name is Jeremy Cowan. I'm editorial director and co-founder of IoT Now, and I'm delighted to be your moderator today. Thank you to everyone for joining us today right around the world. We've got a great discussion for you, brought to you by Flexera Software and backed by independent analysis from Beecham Research. So the first thing to do is introduce you to our speakers. They are Robin Duke-Woolley, CEO and analyst at Beecham Research, who will be speaking first. It's always a pleasure to have you here, Robin.
Great to be here.
Thank you. And I'm delighted to welcome an experienced speaker, but one who's new to us, and that's Matthew Dunkley. He is IoT Strategy Director at Flexera. It's great to have you here too, Matthew.
Thank you very much.
Well, today we are going to look at just how important the right software supply chain is to your success in the Internet of Things, or let's just call it IoT for short. Many of you will be familiar with the way our webinars work. This is being recorded and you can access it from tomorrow via iot-now.com. But we really want to know what you think, so do start sending me your questions right now. And after their presentations, I'll put your questions to our panel. All you have to do is click on the questions button, type your query into the window, and I'll put as many questions to our speakers as time allows. Of course, any I don't get to will be passed to our speakers to answer offline, and their replies will be copied to you all. Some of Flexera's slides will also be available after the webinar. And finally, if you're having any technical issues with audio or slides, you can also use the question window to get advice from our fantastic tech support team. Okay, let's get started by hearing from Robin Duke-Woolley of Beecham Research, and afterwards Robin will hand over directly to Matthew. Robin, the stage is yours.
Thanks very much, Jeremy. So, yes, I'm going to talk about basically how much software there is in the IoT environment, and there's an awful lot. And then Matthew from Flexera is going to talk about how that gets managed. Just a first slide here, which I often start with really just to show the breadth of the IoT market. And normally I'm focusing on all of the applications in like the building sector, the energy sector, the consumer and home sector, the healthcare and life science, industrial, transportation, retail, security, public safety, IT and networks. And I'm looking at it typically from a connections point of view, or how many devices there are out there. But the thing to bear in mind here is that all of these applications in all of these sectors have software in them. They are all defined pretty much by the software that is being run by them. So you've got thousands of different application areas in 9 different sectors that are implemented using software. And then you have to look at what happens underneath that. And typically we have IoT platforms here. We have many different levels. We're showing in this slide 6 levels, and then 2 levels that are security and API management that are like across all levels. But there are more than that. And the thing to bear in mind here is that each of these levels is getting more complex over time. So the communications service level, which is looking at all of the different types of connectivity that can be used in an IoT platform, requires software upgrades, requires new software for handling that. The number of devices being used in each of these sectors and across sectors is increasing tremendously quickly. And then at the data management level, storage, modeling, analytics, a lot of what is going on in IoT now is to do with the data and what to do about the data. Used to be more about the connectivity, but now it's much more about the data itself. So that area is becoming pretty sophisticated pretty quickly. And then, of course, on top of that, you've got the individual applications that I talked about in the last slide. So all of these layers are becoming more complex, more software in all of these areas, and all of that has got to be managed. And just to add another dimension to that, we have a very rapidly increasing number of IoT platforms in the marketplace at the moment. So this slide shows up to second quarter 2016, where we measured about 330 platforms in the marketplace. It's now over 400, and there's no sign of it stopping anytime soon. So not only have we got more platforms, but those platforms that are there are becoming more complex, more software in them, and so forth. So we've got application development, we've got the layer below that, the platform development, and then of course we've got security and all of the aspects of security that need to be continuously upgraded. Now this slide is our security threat map, and it shows all of the levels of an IoT solution, starting with the edge devices, the networks, all the different types of networks, so fixed networks, cellular networks, low power, wide area, satellite, and so forth. Platforms, just talked about those. And then inside that, we've got the actual user application areas, which was in the first slide. Within that, we've got the users themselves. We've got lots of use of big data and so forth. And then connections to IT systems. All of this is run by software. So it's a huge area of activity for IoT. So what are we saying from this? Well, basically, software drives all of the IoT, and it's not something that we can just leave to one side. It's absolutely central to the correct activity of the IoT. But then it's never completely correct. There's always going to be bugs in the software. There's always going to be a need for updates. And these are all essential as part of normal operation. And every software implementation is different. It has to be managed separately and independently of any other piece. So it's quite a significant series of activities that are involved there. Obviously, remote updates are an essential part of IoT security, and that has to be continually updated as part of its normal operation. So if there is a breach in a secure facility or a secure application, then some form of update or re-establishment of the solution will be required just to get the thing back online again. And all of this needs to be managed effectively and needs to be managed effectively in real time. So that's the software challenge, if you like, how to manage it effectively and how to do so in real time to make sure that operations are driven effectively. Well, Matthew at Flexera Software is going to tell us all about how Flexera provide a solution for that in the IoT environment. So over to you, Matthew.
Thank you very much, Robin. So it's great to be here. For the last 5 years at Flexera Software, I and my colleagues have been helping some of the largest and most diverse intelligent device manufacturers, as they were called, to make their transformations from physical device manufacturers to companies offering digital business models and using our software monetization solutions. More recently, many are starting their IoT journeys in areas that you've just been covering and in collaboration again with us, which is great. So today I'm going to go through some tips on how to optimize the software supply chain for the IoT. And I think it just advanced the slide extra, so my apologies there. So as per Robin's introduction to software in the IoT, software is literally everywhere. It's at the hub of smart factories, homes, cities, transportation, retail, leisure, healthcare, and the list goes on. And hence you see why we've got such a large industry. And software is powering literally every company involved on the planet. Excuse me. Software is clearly, powering this and will continue to do so because it's at the backbone of so much of our IoT solutions, whether it's software as a service, cloud services, edge analytics, IoT gateways, control systems, mobile apps, and sensors. And it really brings agility to these products. They allow updates to be deployed with new features and functions, which of course will often need to be activated and will ultimately allow people to deploy new business models. So how do you succeed in an IoT world? Well, there are 5 key objectives that I see for IoT producers. The first is to create profitable IoT solutions, then to protect assets, whether it's from hacking or to keep IP secure. The third is to update software with automation to close security vulnerabilities, if possible, before the end customer even knows that they exist, and to monetize new features seamlessly and on demand, and to provide an awesome end-user experience. The best ones, actually, the customers will probably not even notice, and the worst are going to be horribly exposed and despised.
Okay, well, thank you, Matthew. I think now's a good moment for us to go straight to our first audience poll. And we have a multiple choice. There are 5 options here for you to consider. But we'd really like to know your thoughts on what is your biggest challenge today. Is it creating revenue from IoT solutions? I should add that all you can do is, if you would, just tick one box. We will run through the results in a second. But is your biggest challenge creating revenue from IoT solutions? Is it protecting IP in a connected world? Is it delivering updates? Do you find it's enabling or disabling product features on demand? Or finally, is your biggest challenge today creating a consistent user experience? Let's have a look and see what people have said so far. Well, by far the biggest challenge at the moment is perceived to be creating revenue from IoT solutions, with well over 50%. 36% have said protecting IP in a connected world is their biggest challenge. Nobody opted for delivering updates or disabling product features, but over 9% believe that creating a consistent user experience is a big challenge, the biggest challenge. Matthew, first, is that in line with your expectations?
I think so, actually. I think that what we see from a large number of our customers is that the traditional kind of margins are eroding from just supplying kind of the traditional types of physical products and devices, and they're really then looking to drive revenues from new sources with the IoT. So, and of course this requires protection to make sure it's secure, to make sure that they're realizing maximum value from their products. So I would say absolutely. Yeah, and Robin, what's your take on this?
Well, I'd have thought actually that delivering updates and disable product features on demand would be higher than 0. That would be the typical thing, because delivering updates is a key area and not necessarily very well managed at the moment. So I would have expected that to be a bit higher. On the other hand, creating revenue from IoT solutions is where the revenue is, obviously. So it's obviously of great significance and importance to people at the moment. So I suspect they're probably thinking along the lines of, where is my revenue, and therefore that's why that gets the highest score. But I think that delivering updates should have been higher.
Yeah.
Maybe some of that is also
drives everything else. So yes, I get your point. Matthew, back to you.
Sorry, I was just going to add that maybe some of the delivery and updates is wrapped up in the protecting IP, so really delivering patches and updates. So maybe it got wrapped up a little in the second one.
Okay, yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Okay, Matthew, do continue, please.
Yep. Okay. So in short, meeting these objectives really requires an optimized and automated supply chain for software, which is where I'm going to go now. So the supply chain actually starts right from development and then continues through to the final buyer and ultimately the experience of the end user. I've mentioned how diverse IoT solutions are, as has Robin, and after all, I think everyone and every company that I speak to, they're trying to find their niche in the IoT for their respective solutions. But whatever they're doing, software needs to be tracked and managed seamlessly. And you can also then throw into the mix new business models or monetization models, as we would call them, routes to market, through the channel, and then the sales and support channels as well. And you have some real complexity there. From the development side, you have proprietary software, your open source software, and third-party solutions. I think we've mentioned already that IoT solutions are made up of all kinds of different components. Then there is the channel, whether sales go through resellers and distributors. There's normally technology partners involved, and then there's the service providers in the mix as well. And then at the end of the day, the buyer and the end user may not just want to purchase software initially, but they probably do want to do updates, even if it's purchased updates to add additional functionality. And then when you get the permutations and combinations of all of these things together, you really have got some complexity in this software supply chain for the IoT. So the software supply chain really is quite dysfunctional, one of the most dysfunctional in all of industry today, actually. It has disconnects, there's flaws, there's risks for producers, suppliers, and end customers, and this could be whether it's through bugs, hacks, lost revenues, or overspend by many companies, to be honest. So waste and inefficiencies are actually costing tens of billions of dollars a year. The following points are just some of many examples, actually. Manufacturers are still often building many hardware differentiated models. They're expensive to produce, the variety of models, and actually they're expensive to then stock the multiple models and then to transport right through the supply chain. Then there's the lengthy, support cases. We mentioned maybe some surprise that updates was not more important, but actually, without an automated update solution, the manual processes involved in supporting customers can really eat up margins. And then finally, enterprises really buy lots of software that they actually either don't need, they buy too much, or actually have lots of software that they don't even know about. I mean, I think we've probably all worked for companies where we've been involved in buying software, and then we've moved on to new roles, and this leaves massive amounts of shelfware and waste. So this dysfunctional supply chain really introduces risk. It opens up vulnerabilities that increase the attack vectors for hackers. Intellectual property often has inadequate protection, and patching and updating is often a manual process and resource intensive, or actually it's even missing. So many companies are unaware of the commercial risks of using open source software, or they just ignore the topic and are in the dark about what they're using and the inherent liabilities that this often brings. But if the IoT world could have an efficient supply chain with transparency and automation, the whole channel could agree what's been purchased, what's been used, and what's owned, which would bring great benefits. So what is needed to create an automated and optimized software supply chain for IoT success? I'm going to really go through 7 tips that hopefully are the backbone to bring this. So this slide is really to set the scene, I would say, for tip 1. So many IoT producers, they already have a disparate software business. They don't know who their customers are or what they're entitled to use. And what you can see here is that there are product lines that operate in silos. There's many different technologies that are used, and they're often developed in-house as well. They provide different end-user experiences and actually unique vulnerabilities. It's actually another example of wastefulness, and the same things being developed in different areas. And actually, IoT producers should really focus on what they do best, and this often is not producing these kind of solutions. So tip 1 is kind of a first call to IoT producers. It's to consolidate your software business under the umbrella of a central entitlement management system, maybe a term that may be new to some. The entitlement management system is the system of record for software entitlements. It's there to manage the rights for IoT software components, to provide the unified end user and end customer experience, which I was showing was missing on the last slide, and to speed the development of new business models and how they're deployed into product, and then to automate the management of the software supply chain. So that's tip 1. So now on to tip 2. A bill of materials is really not just for hardware. It should include the software components. You really need to know what's in the code. The bill of materials will give the visibility into the product contents and mitigate risks that are there for both the suppliers and also the buyers. What is probably unknown is that existing products often have inherent risks associated with huge amounts of open source software. And you really need to know, what open source software and third-party components are in your products, to understand your liabilities, to know your risks, and to stay compliant. And as you can see on this slide, 91% of IoT developers are using open source software or tools or strategies, and you'd probably be surprised by how much is actually used in your products if you're listening today. So tip 3 is to enable flexible monetization models. That is the movement towards flexible software-centric business models. We see everywhere, all the customers that we're working with, a real trend towards subscription models and data-driven services as we move towards the everything-as-a-service economy. And what's really important is to provide transparency on what is being used and what is available so that everyone is seeing the same data through the supply chain. A flexible solution is really essential for flexible packaging. And actually, we often hear the word complexity, but actually it's not complexity, it's having real flexibility. You need to be clear about what your customers want and then offer the right products at the right price points to monetize and maximize revenues. Looking at this slide, you can see very typical of a software producer, and now it's moving to IoT and device manufacturers, that features can be bundled up into different packages. So you see the concept of the light, the standard, and the professional edition. And actually, through upselling features and add-ons, it's possible over time for customers to move through the different packages. And what's nice is that if you can really use a flexible licensing and entitlement management system, that the kind of the business models that you see on the right-hand side can be offered to different customers in different ways, seamlessly with the same software products or the same IoT products, which is really helpful for driving revenues and giving your customers the best experience as they move from one model to another. So tip 4 is really to provide a great and unified end-user experience. What is required is there the customer having 24/7 access to self-service their software assets or their software licenses to manage their IoT devices, to have transparency across the supply chain. I mentioned earlier having the same data visible to all the players in the supply chain, and then to offer new business models across what is a complex supply chain. So one example would be to use a notification server to manage a renewals process, to really give everyone the insight in the supply chain about, for instance, when a subscription needs to be reviewed before it expires and causes undue problems. So tip 5 is to protect your applications from hacking, accidental overuse, and software vulnerability risks. Accidental overuse is really a key factor in losing out on revenues, and it's one of the key reasons for implementing a license and entitlement management system to ensure that you maximize the revenues from those places. Tamper-resistant solutions can help to harden applications. You should continuously scan for open source software and third-party software to make sure that any vulnerabilities are detected and handled, to automate updates and patch management, and as I mentioned, to not only have a license and entitlement management system, but to implement this with autonomous processes, and to ensure that things like cloning can be detection during the customer's use of your products, which really enables you to have a stronger security story when you're dealing with your customers. And ultimately, this in combination will greatly increase your application security. So expanding on the updates process, really you need scalabilities for future needs. We all know that things are booming in the IoT, and you need to take account of that when you're putting together an update solution. You need to automate the continuous delivery of new functionality and value, to provide helpful notifications, to ensure that even though things are autonomous and automatic, the customer will sometimes need to take control of their updates. That needs to be taken account of as well. And to link all of this to customer entitlement, so only the eligible should be able to receive their updates. And then there's tip 6, which is to use product insight data for intelligence and visibility. So this is really about knowing who are your customers and what are they using. There are particular industries where this is even more relevant, such as healthcare. To use information about the features that are being used to really understand the behavior of your customers and be able to drive product roadmaps and product updates. And also to drive healthier relationships with customers where you really understand how they're using your products or how they're not using your products, so that you can ensure you have access to make for your customers to be more successful. And then when it comes to consumption-based monetization models, to be able to see exactly what is being used against what is the allowance for a particular product. And tip 7 is to continuously manage the full software lifecycle. It's not just addressing a potentially dysfunctional supply chain that we're talking about. Software has its own lifecycle, whether it's from in-house testing, development and demos, through to trials, initial orders, the provisioning, the activation of products, collecting intelligence, as I was just talking about, the self-management by the customer of their assets, which could be moving entitlements between different IoT devices, keeping them up to date, and then right through to the process, beginning maybe again with new orders, and so it continues. And the challenge is to continually manage this process and to do it seamlessly so the customer has a great experience. So in summary, I've just taken you through my 7 tips for a highly efficient and seamless supply chain, being the backbone for IoT success. The first, to consolidate your software business. The second, to actually know what is in your code and to keep your risks down to the minimum. To enable flexible monetization models and to know who is using what. To provide for an excellent end-user experience, which hopefully they don't even notice. To know where your products are and if they're up to date and secure. to build intelligence on product usage and to create visibility, and finally to continuously manage the entire software lifecycle.
Matthew, thanks. Very stimulating points there, and ones that I think we'd all like to understand a little bit more about what people's experience of these is. You've seen the 7 Flexera tips. What we'd love to know from you is which topic of the 7 that you've seen and that are listed below here, which topic is most relevant to you at the moment? That may change, of course, but at the moment. Is it consolidation of your software business? Is it analysis of the code? Or implementation of flexible monetization models? Is it providing a good user experience? Or is the most relevant to you tracking and updating products? Finally, insight and visibility on product usage, is that the most relevant to you? And finally, continuous management of the software life cycle, is that the most relevant to you at the moment? Please tick one of those. It's going to be fascinating to see what you say. So you've seen the 7 Flexera tips. Which topic is most relevant to you at the moment? And the answers that we have are, by some margin, the implementation of flexible monetization models is front and center of people's concerns, followed by continuous management of the software lifecycle at 18%, providing a good user experience also at 18%, consolidation of the software business at 9%, and tracking and updating products. Robin, is that what you expected to see?
Well, given it's absolutely. So given the scoring in the first set, which had creating revenue opportunities as being the most important, then implementation of flexible monetization models fits pretty closely with that. So I think that's pretty consistent. I see we got a little bit more on track and update products than we had before, so that's also good. So I think this is a pretty good assessment, actually, a pretty good analysis of what priorities are in the marketplace.
And Matthew, what's your take on this? So I think actually you could probably attribute some of it maybe to the functions that our listeners are involved in. I would assume that those interested in things like the analysis of code maybe would be more engineering folks looking to make sure they're designing and developing compliant solutions. And again, kind of the insight and visibility is very much maybe a PM function who are looking to, really optimize their roadmaps and really target their customers. So, it's maybe no surprise because I think this is, the key trend in the industry to really drive, revenues from new sources. But I think that if we maybe had, some additional selections possible rather than just one, maybe we'd see some of the other categories coming up as well.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah.
Matthew, I think there's more that you wanted to say on this, so over to you again.
Okay. So I'm just going to actually go through some industry spotlights just over the next 3 slides. We have a couple of examples where Flexera Software has experience optimizing the software supply chain in kind of different areas with different IoT solutions. So the first of these is kind of in networking. We have customers and solutions which really help them to manage the elastic capacity and to move to kind of new usage-based monetization models. Just the key summary is kind of the movement, the business needs, the movement from custom hardware to using generic hardware but virtual appliances where the number of virtual appliances can be managed from our systems, giving it the elastic capacity. And then again, kind of bringing in the usage-based licensing to enable these companies to offer a new way to price and sell their systems. The benefits that we've really seen are the ability to respond quickly to the changing demand for these systems without having to change hardware, and then to really enable these guys to deliver the flexible monetization models that they desire. So that's the kind of one area where the supply chain has changed, and we've really been able to be a key part in that process. The second of these is a manufacturing use case, and the idea behind this one is to control the manufacturing process using, again, some kind of usage-based license model. In this case, you've got a factory at the bottom, you've got the Flexera technology in the cloud at the top, the entitlement management system with the tracking services, and you have a machine tool builder that is actually supplying equipment into the production line. Now, the trend that we see is a movement away from traditional high capital expenditure on this big expensive machinery, and the move to kind of pay as you use, kind of the autonomous kind of pull economy. So in this case, the machine tool builder has a contract with the factory to provide so many executions of their system, and the machine tool builder will then entitle the customer to use this product so many times. Then over time, and whether it's done in real time for an online system or it's perfectly feasible and reasonable to sync the data offline over time, the factory will slowly consume the counts of their uses of the machine tool builder's equipment. And going back to the points about transparency, at all times, when the data has been synchronized, everyone will have a view on the data and what's being used and what's available. And of course, the factory, if it doesn't sync the data back, could potentially be prohibitive from operating any further. So this is kind of another supply chain model where we have been heavily involved in the process. And then the final kind of example to talk through today is a healthcare example. In this case, you have some home-based healthcare equipment. You have a mobile device which is obviously used in the home by the end user, and actually a device which is going to receive its license rights via the mobile. The customer will order the healthcare equipment from the medical systems provider. The systems provider will again talk to the Flexera back office system and send the device details and entitle the customer to use the particular application. You can see here then that the application will activate, will receive its license rights, and then will act as kind of a gateway for the activation of the device in the home. The device can sync the usage back to the back office system. Everyone can see the meter to have a transparent view of what is being used and when, if they go down this particular line of usage model. And then these companies will traditionally integrate back to their one of their business systems. In this case, we've said an ERP, but it could easily be an e-commerce platform to handle the billing and the payments for the usage over time. So this is kind of the third model. Again, a different kind of supply chain, but bringing the transparency, the new business models, and so on. So I think, in summary, Flexera Software Solutions really are helping to optimize the software supply chain for the Internet of Things. We're providing licensing and security, including application scanning for vulnerabilities, offering this entitlement management that can be automated and offer a great customer experience, being able to deliver and update valuable software and updates, and really to give the in-product analytics and insight data that really is useful for ensuring that you're really tailoring your IoT applications in the right areas. We have considerable experience across multiple industries. I'm not going to run through it, but I'll just leave this slide on view for a few seconds so that our guests can just see the typical companies that we've been working with. And then I would say, thanks for listening to myself and Robin today. I'm really looking forward to any questions and discussions today, and hopefully to ongoing discussions in the future.
Matthew, thank you. That's very helpful. It's certainly given us all a great deal of food for thought, and the proof of that is that we have questions still coming in. Do continue to send them. If you have further questions, please keep them coming. But let's go to the first of those. We have a question that says, we would like to have a better overview on how many of our devices are out there in the field and in use. Is this possible? Matthew, can you tackle that, please?
Okay. It sounds a little bit historical in terms of somebody asking, to know what's out there. I mean, obviously, if we're forward-looking and saying, look, with some, technical changes possible, is this possible? And I would say absolutely. There is actually, as always, more than one solution to the problem, because it can depend greatly upon whether the particular architecture has connectivity or an occasional connectivity or is online altogether. It can depend upon whether you just want to collect that information or whether you want to introduce some kind of monetization models at the same time. But what I would say is, yes, it's perfectly feasible and reasonable to do so, but there's actually more than one approach where we could help with this problem.
The next questioner would like to know if this model can be implemented in the insurance business. I'm guessing I know the answer to that, but I'd love to hear the detail.
So I assumed it was addressed to me again. Actually, our customers are diverse. There is no single industry where things stand out as being our core business, so to speak. So, we have customers across everything from manufacturing to banking to automotive and so on and so on. So the honest answer is yes. I think that some industries like medical would be the obvious one, but including banking and finance, for which insurance, I would assume, without it being the key area of my expertise, would have some constraints on what you can put and where. So I would love to have a discussion about the environment, the constraints, and so on, but I would believe that we can add some value for this particular use case.
Robin, this is an area I know that you've looked at a variety of different industries. Is insurance different in any way? Should we be looking at different understanding of how the business is delivered in this area at all, and also in healthcare, which Matthew mentioned?
Well, the thing about insurance is that it's a big growth area right now. So there is not been traditionally a great deal of activity, or there's been less activity in IoT in insurance to date, but there's a significant interest now. So I think that it's an area that actually would be ripe for this kind of activity now, and also healthcare, but for a different reason. So just to finish off with insurance, certainly in the UK and in Europe, but also increasingly in the US market, the insurance industry is beginning to really get to grips with strategies for IoT, and the need for this kind of service, I think, is pretty apparent. When it comes to healthcare, that all relates to the use of in different healthcare models, and that varies by region. But in general terms, we've always thought that healthcare would grow very quickly in the IoT space, and it's taken quite a bit of time. It's been quicker in the North American market than in Europe. But we can see that it's over the next decade, it's going to be one of the big application areas for IoT. It's just that it needs to get through a lot of national approvals processes and certifications and things like that. So it's a more complex area, being obviously related to individual healthcare and the concerns that people have to make sure it gets done right. However, saying that, of course, that means that software it's immensely important in the healthcare sectors to that it operates effectively and correctly and stuff like that. So my belief is that the opportunities in the healthcare for this type of process and activity will be very high.
Yeah,
if
Matthew,
I could just
singled out healthcare as one of the interesting areas for you. Is there anything you want to add on that?
Yeah, in fact, I was going to add a footnote to maybe both industries. So I'll start with medical. I think what we see in medical is a bit of a split occurring. We're seeing kind of a divide between the everything online. So we mentioned in the use case I showed the kind of home care needs to be online, always connected, and maybe some of the hospital care, which has some similarities actually with the factory environment, where it's often internal networks. Some of the wards, some of the parts of the hospitals will be in places that it's very, very difficult to get software and data in and out of. So obviously that requires more of our offline solutions, whereas the home-based environment would obviously be more online. But going back to insurance, what I kind of neglected to say was that for sure what everyone sees is that there's more and more kind of devices coming into the kind of insurance portfolio. So I would say a typical example of this is kind of the tracker which my son would have in the car to monitor his driving behavior. So that would also be a typical area of the kind of insurance software supply chain where we would be having these kind of discussions.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Yep.
There's more that we could discuss on that, and maybe if there is time, we can come back to it, but I am conscious of time, so let's move on. Matthew, this is a question for you, really. One delegate says he has a question.
Hello, Robin. Are you still there?
Yes, but I got cut off, so I didn't actually hear any of that.
Okay. I believe we've also lost Jeremy at the moment.
Ah, okay.
So if you could step in. If you're listening, everyone, we believe Jeremy may have had a power cut. He had a problem earlier today, so I think Jeremy will take over as the chair. Robin will take over as the chair for a few moments.
Okay, all right. No. I think a next question is, I have a question regarding your point on enabling and disabling features. Could we also track if a feature is actually being used? I don't think we've had that question yet, have we? We haven't, and it's a very, very valid question. Yes is the short answer. Again, per what I was saying earlier, there are different architectures that features will be enabled and disabled in. There will be, for instance, some IoT devices that will connect through a license server, in which case there will need to be a synchronization periodically from the server to share the information back with our back office system. And then, of course, through reporting, it will be possible to determine which features and functions are being used where. It becomes much more straightforward in the connected world, where you have IoT software, whether it's in devices, in the cloud, or on mobile, could be anywhere, actually maybe periodically talking back to our back office system, which will really give great insight about products and where they're being used. Okay, yes.
And just to add one note to that, I mean, in terms of the features and functions within a specific application, we can actually instrument the applications further to actually see the number of times that different features and functions can be used to really enable the producer to have some really great information about the behavior and the of the system during usage. So I would say that it's a great question, but absolutely.
Okay. Oh, you are back. Well done. Okay, good. All right, you can take over, Jeremy.
I'm phoning from the UK, and dialing in from here. We are experiencing a bit of a storm, so it's possible that my connection was knocked out by that. My apologies. I will move to a question that I think hasn't been asked yet, and Robin, you will correct me immediately if I'm wrong, that we are only selling, says one delegate, through distributors and don't have detailed information on our customer base. Could that be improved with your solution at Flexera? That's really one for you, Matthew.
Okay. So the channel management that's possible with the back office system really does enable you to have two distinct models of operation. There are certain industries, certain companies where there are absolute requirements that the distribution partners do not give that kind of information back up the chain, in which case, sometimes through the legal and commercial relationship between the companies, that is kind of not implemented in that way. But, for anyone who can actually, and many large organizations can influence this channel, they will absolutely be able to, to see the channel below, right through to the end customer. So the answer there is absolutely, but it very much depends on the data protection that's agreed between the entities in this supply chain.
Yeah. There's a good question for you here, Matthew, from a delegate in the States. He's interested in knowing whether your entitlement services can be integrated with third-party IoT platforms.
Okay. The answer there is yes, and we're beginning this journey. Our systems have very open interfaces and can be integrated, with systems in different ways. The needs of these systems may be different, though. I mean, sometimes this is to control the different behavior that the end customers can actually have in these systems. So essentially it could be used to tailor the behavior and functions available to end users. But equally, there are some where it might be to collect certain instrumentation data about the way that applications are being used. So, I would say yes, but further discussions would really explore the needs of this potential area of interest, and then we could come back and recommend the best way forward.
Okay. One woman has sent in a question that asks, we have an industrial IoT solution and endpoints aren't always connected. How can we automate the update process? That's for you, Matthew, please.
Okay. So this is actually an area which I am extremely keen that we in Flexera develop further. But, where we are today, we can provide a kind of an update gateway that allows systems that are not always connected to be able to update. I think in the future I would like to make this even more diverse, but for the time being we can do so, but it's through kind of a proxy, and the end devices would feed information up to the proxy, which would then talk to the back office and receive updates, and then finally deploy the updates down onto the clients. But again, if I knew more about the exact application, I could probably be more specific than that. But yes, through a proxy, it's possible.
Okay. There's time for probably a couple more questions. One, again for you, Matthew. You talked about showing usage data back to customers. What usage can you measure?
So actually, the toolkit that gets integrated into the IoT software application will allow for that application to instrument in whatever way the producer sees fit. What is really essential is that the producer decides what is a sensible metric to actually capture. So, it could be anything from the medical example I showed earlier, which would be the number of times that maybe a measurement is taken. That could be a good measure, right through to the throughput of data, and so on. So actually, once the metrics are discussed and agreed between the producer and their prospective customers, then they would instrument their applications and send the usage data back. So there's no constraints on the data types, but I would say that it needs to be a very well chosen data set to ensure it's future proofed. We all know, for instance, that the bandwidths of data, for instance, coming into the home have risen kind of exponentially over the last 15 years. And if you were to choose, say, that volume of data as a metric, you can anticipate that in 3 or 5 years' time, that the volumes of data would be many times larger, let's say, than they are now. So it needs to be a well thought through process.
I can see if I'm a little bit cheeky, I can squeeze in another question, and I'm going to ask one for myself. I wanted to know, from what you were saying in the presentation that you gave, Matthew, if it is in fact quite rare that when you get to a new client, you find a central entitlement management system already in place.
I think that's absolutely the case, and I think that on top of the kind of commercial and economic trends that we see with people moving to subscriptions and things like this, I would say it's one of the next biggest trends that we see are that these large organizations are typically on a journey to bring together what are disparate software systems and centralize a software business. And obviously, whilst not naming any folks that we've spoken to recently, we've had numerous discussions in the past, especially the last 2 to 3 years, with these big. They used to call themselves kind of device manufacturers. They now all want to be IoT companies, and they really need to learn and to manage their software business in a unified way, and that just typically hasn't been the way in the past. I mean, lots of these companies haven't even been selling these solutions. They've been giving them away for free to supplement their physical goods sales, and actually now the software itself is really becoming one of the most prevalent parts of their systems, and they have to and they will monetize this under a central software business.
Yeah, it's a changing business model for everyone. Robin, I'm conscious that many of the questions have been directed at Matthew, but I would just love to ask you, if you wouldn't mind, just giving a sort of a few seconds wrap-up of any conclusions you've drawn from this.
Well, I think I'd give a general overview that the type of service that Flexera is offering is, I think, becoming increasingly important in the IoT space. We're beginning to get much more dependence on IoT solutions, much more to do with, not just critical infrastructure, but also mission critical type of applications, and the need to manage the updates of these, the need to ensure that the software is working all the time is becoming increasingly important. That wasn't perhaps the case before with M2M applications in those days, but now that it's becoming much more central to the strategy, and particularly when we talk about revenue opportunities, revenue and revenue generation is always central to an organization and its bottom line, its future, and so forth. So that, if you like, means that much more is moving towards a mission-critical status.
Yeah. Well, you've summed it up beautifully. That really does bring to the conclusion, because the aim of this webinar has been to try and understand not just how, but why it's so important to optimize and automate the software supply chain. And your comments there, Robin, distilled into probably the 2 key words would be mission critical. In the panel discussion, we've heard some of the challenges. Sadly, that's all we have time for. I would love to continue this discussion further, hopefully there'll be an opportunity to do that on another day. But in the meantime, please remember to bookmark our website at IOT-now.com. There you'll find the latest news, blogs, events, and videos, and very soon you'll be able to stream this webinar from our site, probably in the next 24 hours. It just remains for me to say a huge thank you to our speakers, Robin Duke-Woolley of Beecham Research. Thank you as ever, Robin.
Thank you very much, Jeremy.
And Matthew Dunkley of Flexera Software. Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you, Jeremy.
And thank you both for being completely unfazed by the temporary absence of your moderator. Most of all, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for joining us. Keep safe. We really do appreciate the time you spent with us. I'm off to go and have a stat word with BT. And from everyone here at IoT Now, enjoy the rest of your day. Bye for now.